José Gutiérrez Solana, born in Madrid in 1886, bore witness to the rapid industrialization and urbanization of his era. While some artists saw urbanization as hopeful and positive, Solana's paintings and writings often convey the threat of urban development to Spain, especially in regard to the working class. For this reason, Solana's paintings frequently portray impoverished subjects in spaces that the Spanish elite would consider the underbelly of society, such as slums, brothels, and taverns. Additionally, Solana paints individuals with lower-class occupations, such as clowns and sex workers. Interestingly, the vocations he depicts are often connected to performativity, as the workers must assume a specific identity in order to please their clientele, who are usually members of the upper class. One such painting is his work from 1912 to 1913, titled Masked Street Musicians. In this presentation, I will explore how the painting invites viewers to consider the challenges faced by poor individuals in urban settings and the ways in which impoverished individuals must perform in order to navigate their circumstances, ultimately leading to a loss of identity. In Masked Street Musicians, Solana depicts a group of performers playing music on a dark street. While street musicians are typically associated with entertainment and liveliness, they are portrayed ghostly in this painting, almost as if they are dead men walking. In fact, the masks they wear are skeletal, creating the impression that these performers have risen from their graves in order to play music for the passers-by. The dark color palette contributes to this feeling of death, as the gloomy hues strip the figures of any colorful connection to the living world. Solana's death-like imagery here could indicate his critique of modernity in a few ways. First, the skeletal bodies may be reference to the malnourishment people experience when they cannot afford sustenance, showcasing how poverty literally kills people. On the other hand, the connection to death in the painting could also refer to a more psychological death, the loss of identity. This is especially accentuated by the fact that the masks are skeletal, as masks are intrinsically connected with personas, and skeletons are almost always associated with death. In fact, the painting could even be interpreted as a sort of psychological memento mori image that warns the viewers of the inevitability of death through identity loss. Building upon this death of identity, art historian José Luis Barrio Gray notes that Solana's works from 1909 onward have several important developments, one of which he describes as the presence of, quote, tensions and ambiguities between the inanimate and the animate, close quote. Barrio Gray goes on to explain that Solana's works begin representing mannequins and wax figures as human-like and living during this period, whereas his human figures become more grotesque and inanimate. This certainly seems to be the case in Masked Street Musicians, where the figures' masks make them appear as animated corpses. Interestingly, Solana paints the musical instruments in the same bone-white color as the musicians' masks, therefore creating a connection between the performers and the inanimate objects in the scene. In portraying the scene in this way, Solana emphasizes the dehumanization the musicians experience being forced to perform for the upper class. In fact, this could even suggest that the musicians are just as much objects to the upper class as the instruments are to the musicians. In the context of Spain's progression towards modernity, this equation of musicians with objects could furthermore be a visual representation of lower-class workers being turned into commodities by the bourgeoisie. The mask motif is not unique to Masked Street Musicians, as they frequently appear throughout Solana's oeuvre. In an analysis of Solana's 1914 painting, Supplicatory Procession in Castile, Barrio Gray elaborates on Solana's use of masks. Quote, it is as if the ambiguous boundaries between face and mask come to pose questions about self-identity and about how real a phenomenon self-dehumanization is. Close quote. Barrio Gray is referring to the figure that is at the right of the central figure here. So, this figure right here. As the contours of his face make it difficult to decipher whether or not he is wearing a mask. By obscuring the boundary between the face and the mask, Solana demonstrates how individuals' identities can become hidden beneath the role they are forced to play. This motif can also be found in Masked Street Musicians. Just as in Supplicatory Procession in Castile, Solana does not make a clear distinction between the masks and the actual faces of the figures. In fact, the only real indications that these are masks are 1, the title of the painting, and 2, the fact that the skin color on their hands does not match their face. In blurring the line between reality and artifice, Solana suggests a loss of true self in the act of performance. Furthermore, he connects poverty to performance, emphasizing how impoverished individuals can lose their sense of identity along their path towards economic survival. With his tragic view of the performers, as well as his use of death-like imagery, dark colors, and hazy aura, Solana departs decisively from historical depictions of street musicians. For example, when compared to Manet's Street Singer from 1862 and William Morris Hunt's Street Musician, also from the 19th century, Solana's masked street musicians presents a much more pessimistic perspective. While Manet's and Hunt's portraits have more muted and somber color palettes, Solana's colors are garish, with the bone-white color creating a sickening contrast to the black background. Manet's and Hunt's subjects are recognizable with human characteristics, but the faces of Solana's figures remain hidden behind the masks, preventing the viewer from seeing who they actually are. Additionally, Manet and Hunt paint their subjects with a sense of dignity as they are positioned in central and upright positions. Conversely, the figures in masked street musicians, and particularly this figure on the very right here, are in more hunched over positions, which conveys a feeling of defeat or resignation. These differences between the paintings highlight the motivation behind their works. While Manet's and Hunt's paintings endow the street performers with a sense of honor and serve more as transcriptions of reality, Solana's is expressionistic, conveying the underlying truth of what it means to be a street performer. That is, to be underpaid, overworked, and underappreciated. When compared to earlier depictions of street musicians, such as those by Manet and Hunt, it is clear that Solana is not just documenting a scene, but critiquing the harsh realities of urban life for the marginalized. Although Solana does portray dehumanization in this painting, which effectively brings awareness to the plight of impoverished people, Solana's fascination with the lower class has problematic elements to it as well. For example, in his book, Madrid, Escenas y Costumbres, Solana writes, quote, "Since I was a child, I have felt a certain attraction for all that people qualify as horrible. I have liked to see hospitals, the morgue, and those who have died a violent death. I have always gone to all such places. Often I have been thrown out and have returned home disgusted. How many times have I followed the wounded in street accidents? Sometimes, however, I have been an involuntary witness to those emotional tragedies which caused disagreeable impressions." Close quote. As is clear by Solana's words, his fascination with so-called horrible subjects appears voyeuristic and exploitative, bordering on fetishization or obsession. This raises ethical questions about his art, such as whether or not his attention to the lower class can be empowering if he too views them as a spectacle. This is further accentuated by the fact that Solana was born into a wealthy family, as his father, who was born in Mexico, moved to Spain after receiving an inheritance from relatives who lived there. His father's inheritance ended up funding Solana's art training, trips around Spain, and various interests such as singing lessons and trips to watch bullfights. Thus, Solana's privileged position further separates him from the lower class with which he was so fascinated. Because of this, his interest in them does seem to stem from the fact that they are like an exotic other to whom he can study. Additionally, Solana seems to hold different working class occupations in various esteem. For example, Solana's painting, Mariners of Castro Urdiales from 1915 to 17, which you can also see in the Spain and the Hispanic World exhibition, portrays a group of sailors in Santander in northern Spain. In this painting, the working class subjects are not depicted as grotesque or deformed, but rather as humans, creating a stark contrast to the figures in masked street musicians. Their facial features are more easily identifiable, which humanizes them, and the absence of masks allows the viewer to connect to them without a barrier obscuring their true identity. Additionally, Solana was known to have commented on the heroism and hardworking nature of sailors, referring to them in his text La España Negra as, quote, "generous, picturesque, and brave sailors going out to do the rough work of fishing, so full of danger," close quote. With these words in mind, Solana's more grim, ghostly portrayal of the street musicians may indicate his valorization of certain segments of the working class over others, such as those who work with their hands versus those who perform. On the other hand, this juxtaposition could also be seen as a deliberate choice to show how certain sectors of the working class are dehumanized while others are valued and appreciated. In any case, while his intention may have been to shed light on the suffering of the working class and critique urban modernity's role in their plight, Solana's voyeuristic tendencies and privileged background does complicate his relationship to his subjects. Despite the more problematic aspects of Solana's relationship to the working class, his work, Masked Street Musicians, does provide a powerful critique on urbanization and its effect on underprivileged individuals. Solana's commentary is especially poignant considering the lack of representation of the working class in art prior to the 19th century, as European artists historically focus on painting religious icons, mythological figures, and members of the aristocracy. Additionally, his departure from previous, more idealized depictions of street performers emphasizes his intention not only to document the visual world around him, but also to express its underlying reality. Indeed, not only does Solana include working-class individuals as his main subject, but he also draws attention to their suffering and unfortunate circumstances. He does so by depicting them as ghostly and skeletal, which conveys the dehumanization that they can experience in their occupation. And this dehumanization is even further emphasized through the musicians' masks, which obscure their physical characteristics from those for whom they perform. In doing so, the mask suggests a loss of identity, as the lower class must assume a fake persona in order to please the elite and survive financially. In connecting poverty with performativity, Solana once again presents his tragic view towards modernity that he is so known for, as extreme income inequality is most often prevalent in urban spaces. Thus, through his use of death-like imagery, dark colors, and ambiguous portrayal of masks, Solana invites viewers to contemplate the challenges faced by those living on the margins of society and to consider the ways in which urbanization can worsen their struggles. Thank you.